I'm grateful to be joined by Deputy Comment Editor at the Telegraph, Annabel Denham. Hello, Annabel.
Hi, Kevin.
Thanks for joining us. First off, let's talk about the big story of the day. ULEZ expansion across London is lawful. The High Court has ruled. This was after 5 local councils took the Mayor, Sadiq Khan, to court. They, of course, quite rightly, in my view, said, this has got nothing to do with clean air. You've made such a financial mess of running this city. The city's on the verge of bankruptcy. Certainly Transport for London is. You need the money. And now thousands of cash-strapped motorists are going to have to spend £12.50 just to drive down the road in their own cars. This was, I think, an outrageous decision by the judge because part of the basis of these legal actions by these boroughs, and by the way, just in case people think this is all London-centric, this sort of thing is happening in 10 other cities all over the country. But part of the basis of the judgment of the legal actions against the Mayor was that he hadn't consulted before the local population before imposing the ultra-low emission zone schemes on them. The judge said, although the consultation was not in-depth, it was lawful. I've got to say, you know, I'm told you're not supposed to criticise judges, and I don't know what was going through his head, but I've got this feeling he's part of the sort of climate change emergency blob who use climate change, the alleged emergency, to beat us over the head and impose laws, rules and regulations on us that we just don't want.
Certainly there's a cohort of judges we know, Kevin, who are very uncomfortable with the idea of prosecuting Just Stop Oil protesters, no matter how much disruption or illegal activity, indeed, they might be involved in. And now I commend the councils for trying to take this case to court, for trying to block the expansion of ULEZ. I completely agree with the points that you've made about it being extremely regressive. It's going to hammer white van man, people like single mums who really need their car to get their children around, and it's all because the Mayor of London blew this financial hole in TFL, in its budget, early on in his tenure, and he's trying to make up the shortfall. I think that's absolutely clear. However, I think really that this was the outcome we all knew was coming, but hoped might go the other way. Ross Clark made a very good point earlier today. He said, you know, there was ultimately no chance at all that the judge was going to turn around and say, look, ULEZ is a ridiculous idea. It's a regressive tax on poor motorists, and therefore I declare it illegal, because unfortunately there is no law against silly ideas. We elect people like Sadiq Khan into power. We elect members of parliament, and we have to put our faith in them to implement laws and regulations that we agree with, that are just and that are sensible. But unfortunately, in the case of ULEZ, that simply hasn't happened. I think what will be very interesting, particularly in the aftermath, obviously, of the Uxbridge result, that failure by Labour to take Boris Johnson's old seat, is what is going to happen in the mayoral elections next year, because those could also be turned into some kind of referendum on ULEZ. And perhaps, it may not look like it now, but perhaps we could see people throwing their weight behind Susan Hall.
The boroughs that took this legal action also said that the Mayor was acting outside of his powers, beyond his remit. The judge, of course, said that he wasn't. But I always find it very strange that we have this Mayor, you know, presiding over a city that is in trouble, particularly with violence on the streets, stabbings, attacks on women. He prioritises clean air, which he says kills thousands of people in the city every year. Those are the kind of statistics, you know, that phrase, lies, damn lies and statistics, they're all the same. You just pluck a number out of the air and you say, this killed 300 children last week. You know, there's no way you prove this. And there is quite a lot of evidence to suggest that no one has ever died in London due to air pollution. And by the way, our air pollution is a lot cleaner than it was, say, 10 years ago. So we've done a lot already. Let's have a little look and listen to the Mayor as he reacts to his triumph in the hearing today. Take it away, Sadiq.
Well, I think the judgment today is good news for London. It means we can make greater progress cleaning up the air in outer London from August the 29th. Look, the decision to expand the ultra-low emission zone was a difficult one, not one I took lightly, but it's the right one because it's vital we make more progress cleaning up the air in our city. It's a fact that air pollution in our city leads to around 4,000 premature deaths a year, leads to children having stunted lungs forever, and adults with a whole host of health issues from asthma to cancer, dementia to heart disease.
Yeah, Annabel, I'd like to state right now, it is certainly not a fact. That is extremely disputable. As I say, that is a statistic plucked out of the air to prove that his clean air obsession is justified. There's no evidence to suggest what he said there is true. It is not a fact, is it?
It's very difficult to pinpoint blame in the way that Sadiq has done. It's certainly true that most people want to live in cities with clean air. As you say, emissions are indeed coming down. The number of cars that are compliant with ULEZ now in Greater London, I think, is around 90%. It's slightly lower for out of London. And this is, to be expected. Around 2 million cars are thrown onto the scrap heap every year. People are buying new, more efficient cars all the time, and we don't necessarily need the Mayor of London to try and accelerate this in what is going to be a very costly way. £12.50 daily fee in parts of London, that is a lot of money to many people, and it will be prohibitive, and many people are going to view this as just another frontier in the war on motorists that is going on up and down the country. And I think this sets a very dangerous precedent now. You have taxation essentially without representation with the expansion of ULEZ. There are people who will live just outside of London and therefore have not voted for the mayor, but who need to come into London just over the border in order to work, and they are going to find themselves facing this daily fee in order to do so, and they haven't voted for it. And that, to me, is immensely problematic. And I think that we're going to see councils up and down the country, we're going to see other city mayors looking at this and thinking, well, perhaps I can expand some of my policies, perhaps I can push.
I can make a few quid here. Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah. Also on people who haven't voted for it.
Absolutely. The cities in question, and there will be more, Birmingham, Bristol, Oxford, Glasgow, Bath, Bradford, Portsmouth, Newcastle and Sheffield, all of which have some kind of form of the ULEZ scheme. A lot of them are calling it LEZ, as in low emission zones, as opposed to ultra low, but they'll probably go down the ultra route soon. And we are, many believe, making our way towards the nightmare of basically paying by the mile, that in the future, and I wouldn't put it past Mayor Khan, you'll be charged a toll for every mile you drive. So driving and, motoring will become, prohibitive for lots of people who actually desperately need their car. A lot of the people who are affected by this, Annabel, are old people because their cars are old and therefore they are not compliant with the ULEZ rules. And of course, small businesses, who need cars and need vans. Vans are very much under the ULEZ umbrella, so they'll have to pay. Small businesses could be put out of business. I think many will be. Old people are going to suffer because they'll be at the forefront of having to pay £12.50 to go down the shops they probably can't walk to. I mean, you can go on and on about what is so fundamentally, profoundly wrong about what Mayor Khan is imposing on these poor people who actually live in the outskirts of the city where the air never was that bad. Now, after years of this clean air policies of his, are, absolutely perfect. So it's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yes, I think it is extraordinary. And it's often the politicians who love to criticise people like Rishi Sunak for being out of touch because they're married to billionaire heiresses or with inheritances worth hundreds of millions of pounds, and they accuse them of being out of touch. Well, I think it's the London metropolitan elite who are out of touch. It's those people who don't seem to realise that there are others who may not be able to cycle or walk to where they need to get to, who might have disabilities, who might be over a certain age and struggling to walk for that reason. People who, as we said, white van man, of course, there was the person who tried to carry a ladder onto the tube and found it immensely difficult. People who actually require a van or a car in order to get to work. As I say, your parents trying to ferry their children around, they may not live very close to the school. There are any number of people who are going to be hit by this, and so many unintended consequences. And quite frankly, I think that it's those politicians, the ones who are imposing this on people, who are out of touch, who don't seem to understand what life is like for many ordinary working people up and down the country. So, let's see what happens. But I think there's an interesting political dimension to this, which is how Keir Starmer is going to respond to this. Because the last thing I read said he thought Sadiq should reflect on
Yes,
ULEZ.
he did. He said that, yes.
And Sadiq is clearly not pausing to reflect on it. This is something he's going to ram through at the end of the summer. And where does that leave the Labour Party? Because already this week we've had the Conservative Party off the back of that Uxbridge result, which was essentially a referendum on ULEZ, perhaps starting to backtrack on some of the net zero, some of the unpopular green policies. Now, where does that leave the Labour Party? Are they going to put pedal to the metal, obviously in an electric vehicle, or are they going to start to waver a little bit themselves? And what does this mean, about the clash between Keir Starmer and Sadiq Khan? And let's not forget that we had Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister, former Labour leader of the Labour Party, who is said to have some influence with Keir Starmer, pointing out that net zero cannot be forcibly imposed on people. And we need to bear in mind that the UK is only responsible for 1% of global emissions. What we're going to have to do is find a way for developing nations to adopt the cleaner technologies that will allow them to industrialise. But we cannot do this alone. So, as I say, I think that this is politically very interesting. How can the Tories take advantage of it? And where does it leave the Labour Party?
Yeah, it's a very interesting point that you made there. There's no doubt at all that the man who is most disappointed by this decision, by this ruling that ULEZ expansion can get the go-ahead, is Keir Starmer. He desperately didn't want this to happen. So I don't suppose Sadiq Khan is on Sir Keir's Christmas card list